because your devices would be arcing over. The goal of the electromagnetic pulse weapon is to make portions of the circuit arc and burn. There's a second category of weapons that basically use laser energy. Whereas the electromagnetic pulse weapon is one big, powerful pulse, a laser is a continuously delivered stream of radiation with enough intensity to cause damage. We will be able to use high-energy lasers not only to defeat enemy aircraft and, even more importantly, unmanned aerial vehicles, which are small targets. We've actually successfully, in several dozen tests, defeated artillery shells with high-energy lasers that are directed at a very small spot with enough energy to detonate the shell in the air before it lands.
These new weapons are not solely for use against artillery and communications. They are also designed for use against people.
Obviously, one thing that's looked at is a blinding laser on the battlefield so that soldiers attacking, for instance, a particular position could be subjected to a broadband sweeping laser with enough energy to temporarily blind the soldier if he were looking in the direction of the laser. And we have been testing what I'm going to call microwave weapons for crowd control. What they do is, again, instead of using a single pulse, these are continuously directed energy weapons that heat the skin very rapidly, much like your microwave oven. In fact, almost exactly like your microwave oven, but they're controlled broadcast microwave pulses. And obviously, you can derail a opposing force very quickly if all the soldiers begin to feel a burning sensation on their skin that's truly a burning sensation. Now, the nice thing about, from the offensive point of view of a microwave weapon, is you don't really have to critically injure people with a microwave.
In war-torn countries, it is not always easy to separate the opposing forces from ordinary citizens. By using non-lethal directed energy weapons, similar to the benign red laser pointers or supermarket scanners, the military could stop their opponents without causing them permanent injury.
In Somalia, what you saw were Somali militia interspersed with civilians, not wearing uniforms, almost impossible to discriminate from the civilians who surrounded them, who were then using that as an opportunity to fire upon U.S. forces. In a situation like that, the ability to disperse that force using a non-lethal system would be very advantageous and eliminates the situation of you having to fire upon civilians in an environment where that's the last thing that you really want to do.
Obviously, if your goal is to cause your opponent to desist in whatever he's doing that you don't like, as opposed to killing him, then these are ideal weapons. And as we become more civilized, and as the face of war gets more widely broadcast, the days where I think it would be politically acceptable to create mass carnage on the battlefield like was in World War I, those days are past politically. So, in point of fact, as a reality, we must have weapons that make war, if you will, to the extent it can be, make war in a more civilized manner.
Electromagnetic weapons could be more civilized than conventional weapons, but the long-term effects of the atomic bomb were at first downplayed and poorly understood.
Yes, atomic warfare staggers the imagination, but atomic warfare is still the old story. Get there fastest with the mostest. And because automatic bombing, although in the predictable future, is still not yet here, the best way to get the mostest there, the fastest, is by the wings of the Air Force.
Every weapon has its unintended and its unexpected consequences. You only have to look at the nuclear weapon to see that. We see the Gulf War syndrome, now believed perhaps to be traceable back to exposure to chemicals during that war, maybe to the debused again in the new war. They're not really sure about it. Nevertheless, it's acknowledged that they have had health effects that the veterans of other wars did not have, and they're being compensated by the government.
The government may know more than the rest of us about the potential health effects of these sorts of systems, We do know that the Air Force has a human systems laboratory where they have been researching what these devices could potentially do to humans. That research has not yet been made public. Theoretically, these weapons are meant to affect electronics without hurting humans, but obviously it will take years and years until we truly know all the health ramifications of how these weapons operate.
These weapons work with directed energy, much like harnessing the power of an overcharged lightning bolt. When the blast occurred at the Beckford home, it was difficult to assess if the mysterious phenomenon had human consequences. Neighbors said Susie Beckford was never the same again. It may be a coincidence, but 4 months after the event, she died. Her death certificate cited heart failure as the cause of death.
Well, it's been suggested that these weapons are more humane because they attack technology, computers and so forth, rather than human beings, and the VMADs attack the human in a non-lethal way. But that's a very tricky question because there's a distinct possibility, by the way, that others will get these weapons and turn it around and fry our computers and so forth. And believe me, the job of protecting weaponry from the electromagnetic pulse is one that has not been solved and may not really in principle be solvable.
Because of its technological superiority, the U.S. military is certainly the most susceptible to those types of technological innovation. And that's why other countries who realize they can't take the U.S. military on in a fair fight are interested in developing these types of things because they think it's going to help them to even out the playing field.
With every generation and every war, we witness new and improved ways to kill people. The atomic bomb of the Second World War, napalm in Vietnam, smart bombs in Desert Storm. America stands ready to stun the world with a vast array of powerful new weapons, and other countries are lining up for this new electromagnetic arms race.
I don't know who has electromagnetic pulse weapons like the ones that we are developing. The reality is probably countries like China and Russia. Both do have very advanced military technology. China, for example, is at the upper tier of laser technology and things like that. So, yeah, I think those are the three countries who will develop this technology. Perhaps India might be able to do it.
Because these electromagnetic weapons are so new, they are not controlled by treaties that cover conventional weapons. The United States has plans to build a missile defense shield over Canada's north to shoot down incoming ballistic missiles. This could lead to the deployment of electromagnetic weapons in space and unleash forces too powerful to control.
I became interested in the Space Preservation Act and in developing the Space Preservation Act when I learned that our administration in Washington was looking at a program called Vision 2020. And Vision 2020 actually is a program for the United States to dominate the world from outer space. Now, I love America, and I'd like to say that we're number one. But let me tell you something. We don't need to be number one in weapons in space.